Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. He first saw her long before she noticed him. The ranch market was crowded that morning, dust rising in soft clouds, horses snorting, the smell of rain still clinging to the air after a dawn storm. People moved in clusters, trading corn, beans, leather, and gossip like they always did. But then a strange quietness rolled through the place, the kind that only happens when someone tall enough to draw curiosity walks by. She moved through the stalls with her shoulders pulled inward, as if she were trying to shrink herself even though it was impossible. At 7 feet 3 inches, she towered over every fence post, every wagon, every man standing near the fruit crates. Her long braids brushed against her lower back, and her stride, steady, controlled, suggested someone who'd learned to walk softly so she wouldn't draw more eyes than necessary. The narrator noticed how people parted in front of her. Not fear, not disgust, but the kind of uncertainty people show when they don't know how to approach someone who breaks their understanding of normal. And she felt it. Every look. Every whisper. You could see it in the way her fingers tightened around the basket she carried, how her jaw clenched for a second before she forced it to relax. But to him, she didn't look wrong, strange, or out of place. She looked remarkable. A presence you couldn't forget even if you tried. He watched her study the apples at a vendor's stall, hesitating, almost apologetic as she leaned down to pick one. Her movements were gentle, practiced, like she'd spent years trying not to intimidate the world with something as simple as reaching for fruit. And there was something heartbreakingly human in that small effort. The narrator felt something shift inside him. Not desire, something quieter. Recognition. Like he'd spotted another soul who lived life with a kind of heaviness he understood in his own way. When she turned, their eyes met for the first time. She looked startled, as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. But he didn't look away. He offered a small, sincere nod, the kind of look that said I see you, not I'm staring at you. Her eyes flickered. Confused. Then wary. Then something softer, almost hopeful, before she glanced down at her hands again, as if she didn't know what to do with attention that wasn't pity or shock. The narrator approached slowly, not too close, not too fast. The air between them seemed to stretch, warm and nervy, the world fading just a little around the edges. You could almost hear her heartbeat just from the tension in her shoulders. He didn't speak first. He let her breathe. Let her understand that he wasn't startled by her. And then, in a quiet voice, steady, respectful, he said, "Those are the sweetest apples in the whole market. If you like them, the orchard's just south of my ranch." Her lips parted slightly. Not a smile yet, but the beginning of someone realizing this man wasn't afraid to simply be near her. A tiny shift. A small beginning. But for her, it was the first moment in years she didn't feel too big. She simply felt seen. She didn't expect him to walk beside her. Most people kept a polite distance, letting her stride alone with her head lowered and her steps measured. But as she left the market, basket in hand, she heard slow, steady footsteps fall in rhythm with hers. When she glanced to the side, he was simply there. Not looming. Not gawking. Just walking like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, she stiffened. Her shoulders rose, her breath caught, an instinctive reaction from years of knowing her height made people uneasy. But he noticed the tension and adjusted his pace, giving her a bit more room without drifting away entirely. A gentle compromise. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said softly. "You didn't," she replied, eyes down. But her voice betrayed her, quiet, cautious, threaded with a fragile uncertainty. The road stretched ahead of them, lined with wild grass still jeweled with leftover raindrops. The sky was clear now, washed clean and blue, and the air felt almost too calm, as if nature itself wasn't sure how to behave around the two of them. He kept his hands loosely tucked into his pockets, careful not to crowd her. She noticed that. Most men tried too hard, either stepping too close to prove they weren't intimidated, or stepping too far to hide that they were. He did neither. "You're from the Northern Trail?" he asked gently. She nodded. "My cabin's near the ridge." "That's a quiet place," he said. "Hard to live there alone." Her steps slowed, just a little. People rarely acknowledged her solitude directly, they tiptoed around it like it was shameful. But the way he said it wasn't pitying. It wasn't intrusive. It sounded like observation, not accusation. "I'm used to it," she murmured. He studied the road ahead, not her. "That doesn't make it easier." The wind carried a faint sweetness from the orchards. Her braids brushed against her shoulders as she turned slightly toward him, curious despite herself. The narrator could sense the shift, the way she softened by a fraction, like someone testing the warmth of water before stepping in. "You're not bothered walking with me?" she asked, and the vulnerability in her voice was so raw it felt almost like she'd handed him something fragile. He shook his head, offering a small smile. "Why would I be?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. The sunlight caught on the faint freckles along her cheekbones. Her voice came out low, hesitant. "Because I'm too tall. Too big. People don't like walking beside someone who makes them feel small." His reply came without hesitation. "You don't make me feel small," he said. "You just make me pay attention." The words landed with unexpected weight. She didn't know what to do with them. No one had ever framed her height as something that drew interest rather than discomfort. They continued walking, slower now. Her steps grew less guarded. At one point, her hand brushed his, not intentional, just a shift in the path, and she pulled away instantly, murmuring an apology. He shook his head softly. "It's all right. You don't have to shrink around me." Her breath hitched, so quietly she hoped he didn't hear it. But he did. And he pretended he didn't, out of respect. When her cabin came into sight, she paused, unsure whether to step forward or stay in this strange, gentle moment a little longer. But for the first time in years, the silence between her and another person didn't feel frightening. It felt safe. Her cabin stood alone against the ridge, tall, sturdy, and built with the kind of precision that only someone who'd learned to rely on herself could manage. The porch roof came only to her chest, a reminder of the life she'd shaped to fit her height when the world refused to. She stepped up onto the porch, then paused halfway, turning back toward him. For a moment she looked like she was wrestling with herself, caught between the instinct to retreat into safety and the unfamiliar ache of wanting someone to stay just a little longer. "You came farther than you needed to," she said softly. He shook his head. "I wanted to make sure you got home safe." Her eyes lowered, not with shyness, but with a quiet disbelief that someone would care enough to say something like that without expecting anything in return. He didn't move to follow her inside. He simply stood at the foot of her porch with the fading morning light outlining his silhouette, hands still tucked loosely into his pockets, waiting for her lead. She swallowed, fingers tightening on her basket. "You can come in, if you'd like. Only if you're not busy." His expression didn't change much, but there was a warmth in his eyes that softened the edges of his usual quietness. "I'd like that." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly gentle, woven blankets, tall custom-made furniture, soft light filtering through stitched curtains. The air smelled faintly of pine resin and something sweet, her tea, probably. She moved with a calm precision, setting her basket down, brushing loose strands of hair from her forehead, trying not to appear as nervous as she felt. He noticed the small details, the careful way she folded her hands, the way her gaze flicked to him, then away again. "You can sit," she murmured, motioning toward a chair she'd built herself. He realized with a faint smile that it was the perfect height for her, and slightly tall for him. "It's a good chair," he said, settling in without complaint. Her lips curved into the beginnings of a smile. "I forget that most people don't fit my furniture. I fit just fine." It wasn't about the chair. They both felt it. She poured tea into 2 clay cups. Her hands dwarfed the delicate pottery, but her movements were gentle, practiced. When she handed him his cup, their fingertips brushed, soft, brief, but charged with something warm. She drew her hand back quickly, cheeks coloring. "I don't usually invite anyone inside," she admitted. His voice came quiet. "I'm honored you made an exception." She sat across from him, posture tall but gaze lowered. "Most people come here once. They look at my home or at me. Then they avoid coming back. That won't be me." She inhaled slowly, as if those words struck deeper than he intended them to. "You don't know that," she whispered. He met her eyes, steady and calm. "I meant what I said earlier. You don't make me feel small. You make me look closer." She blinked, taken aback. No man had ever spoken to her like that, not with fear, not with fascination, but with a kind of grounded sincerity that left no room for doubt. The room went quiet. Comfortable quiet. A kind she'd forgotten existed. Outside, the wind brushed soft against the cabin walls. Inside, her lonely world felt warmer. Less empty. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like someone worth spending time with. He stayed longer than he expected. Not because she asked him to, but because the cabin, her world, had a calmness he didn't know he needed. The tea was warm, the quiet was peaceful, and her presence, despite her towering height, had a strange tenderness to it. She seemed unsure of what to do with him there. She kept smoothing the tablecloth, adjusting the cup, tucking stray hair behind her ear, small, nervous gestures that revealed more vulnerability than any words could. "You built all this yourself?" he asked finally, nodding toward a tall shelf stacked with neatly arranged tools. She followed his gaze. "Most of it. It's easier to make things that fit me than try to use things built for someone much smaller." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a matter-of-fact acceptance of a life she'd had no choice but to shape around her own body. "Would you show me?" he asked, careful not to sound demanding. Her eyes widened slightly. "You want to see me work? Only if you're comfortable." She hesitated, chewing gently at her lip before nodding. I can show you." They stepped outside where the afternoon sun had softened into a warm golden wash over the ridge. Behind her cabin, she had a small outdoor work area, wood piles, hand-forged nails, pieces of half-shaped furniture. He noticed how tall everything was built, even her workbench stood nearly at his chest. She moved toward a heavy log that needed splitting. He knew the weight of such wood. He'd split logs his whole life. But watching her lift it like it was nothing stirred something deep inside him, not intimidation, not masculine insecurity, but genuine admiration. "You do this alone?" he asked. She nodded, brushing a braid back over her shoulder. "It's just me. Has been for years." He stepped closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel his presence. "If you ever need help, I don't want to burden anyone," she said quickly, almost too quickly. He paused at that. "You're not a burden." Her breath hitched faintly at the words. She looked away, gripping the handle of her axe as if it were an anchor in a storm. "I know people say things like that," she murmured. "But they don't stay. They say kind words, then disappear when I'm too much." He stepped around her, gently placing his hand over hers where she gripped the axe handle. His touch was warm, steady, and she froze, startled by the sudden closeness. "I'm not disappearing," he said softly. She swallowed, her gaze dropping to their hands. His fingers were dwarfed by hers, but the moment felt balanced, equal, unexpectedly intimate. She didn't pull away. If anything, her grip softened, letting their hands rest together for a heartbeat longer than necessary. When he stepped back, she felt the absence of his touch like a small shift in the air. "Show me what you were working on," he said gently. Her eyes lifted, shy, almost disbelieving, but she nodded and led him toward the half-finished bench. As she explained her design, her voice grew steadier, more confident. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made her feel seen, not inspected. By the time the sun dipped low, something between them had changed. The ridge was the same. The cabin was the same. But she wasn't alone in it anymore. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt shared. The storm rolled in faster than either of them expected. What had begun as a soft breeze turned into a low, distant rumble that vibrated through the ground. Clouds, thick and gray, gathered across the horizon with the kind of suddenness that only mountain weather could manage. She glanced up at the sky, a flicker of worry crossing her features. "We should go inside," she said softly. "This ridge gets hit hard." He followed her toward the cabin, and the first drops of rain began to fall, slow, heavy, deliberate. By the time she pushed open the door, the sky cracked with thunder, and the world outside disappeared behind a wall of silver rain. Inside, the cabin dimmed. The storm made the space feel smaller, more intimate, like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. She paced once, then again. It took him a moment to realize she wasn't afraid of the storm itself, but of being trapped inside with someone who could see her so clearly. He watched her hands tremble faintly as she adjusted a lantern. "Are you all right?" She froze. Her shoulders drew in, that old reflex of hiding herself. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. Another thunderclap shook the cabin, and she flinched, not visibly, but enough that he saw it in the tightening of her jaw. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted to. "You don't have to pretend with me." Her breath hitched. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because she was holding something in. Years of loneliness. Years of feeling like she had to be strong every second of her life, or she would fall apart. "I don't like storms," she finally whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "I don't like how small they make me feel. Even someone my size can feel scared." He moved in front of her, not touching yet, just letting her see the calm in his face, the steadiness in his presence. "It's okay," he said gently. "Everyone gets scared. Even me." Another rumble shook the windows, and her breath came faster. Without thinking, without planning, she reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. A silent plea. He answered it by stepping closer and placing his hand softly over hers. The contact was warm, grounding. She let out a shaky breath and didn't pull away. "You're safe," he murmured. "I'm right here." Her eyes softened, not with embarrassment, but with relief. Real, trembling relief. She let herself lean slightly toward him, resting her weight for just a moment against his shoulder. She was careful not to overwhelm him with her height, but he didn't seem bothered. In fact, he shifted just enough to support her, letting her feel anchored. In the dim light, with the storm howling outside, her guard finally broke. "You don't understand," she whispered. "People expect me to be unbreakable. Strong. I'm not allowed to be scared." "You're allowed," he replied. "You're human." That simple truth, spoken quietly, without hesitation, cut deeper than she expected. Her fingers tightened gently around his hand, and she let herself breathe against him. For the first time in years, she leaned on someone else. And for the first time in his life, he realized how much it meant to be trusted by someone who had carried the world alone. Between the thunder and the closeness, something unspoken passed between them, soft, warm, undeniable. Not a confession. Not yet. But a beginning neither of them could ignore. The storm passed sometime in the night, though neither of them noticed exactly when. He had stayed beside her until her breathing softened, until the tension in her shoulders loosened and exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep. He didn't leave, didn't dare, because for the first time, she had allowed someone close enough to see her fear, and he understood instinctively that leaving her alone after that would feel like abandonment. When morning arrived, light spilled softly through the curtains, warming the wooden floor. She stirred first. The blanket he had draped over her had slipped slightly, resting across her waist. She blinked, confused at the unfamiliar feeling of comfort, then froze when she realized he was sitting nearby, still awake, his back leaning against the wall, eyes half heavy but alert. She sat up quickly, brushing her hair back, embarrassment flooding her expression. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have, last night was, she swallowed, cheeks warming. You must think I'm weak. He lifted his gaze to her, gentle and steady. I don't. Her breath caught. He said it so simply, so sincerely, it felt like a small shock to her chest. I don't know what came over me, she murmured, pulling her knees close. I don't usually let people, she hesitated. See me like that. You trusted me, he replied. That means something. I'm honored, not burdened. She looked away sharply, emotion tightening her jaw. That's the part one don't understand, she whispered. Why you're still here. He scooted a little closer, not too close, but close enough that she felt his warmth. Because I care, he said softly. The words hit her harder than thunder. Her fingers curled in the blanket, knuckles whitening. You shouldn't, she said, voice cracking. People don't care for someone like me. He leaned forward slightly. Someone like you? She shut her eyes, as if gathering courage. I'm too big, she murmured. Too strong. Too different. I make people uncomfortable. I don't fit into their world. Her throat tightened. It would be easier if I didn't feel anything at all. Her honesty wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, broken, the kind of confession born from years of loneliness. He reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse. When she didn't, he gently placed his hand over hers. You fit into my world, he said. Her eyes snapped open, shining with disbelief. That's not possible. It is, he replied. I'm saying it. Silence stretched between them, soft, fragile. She stared at their joined hands, marveling at the contrast between them, her large, calloused fingers and his smaller, steadier ones. Yet the moment felt perfectly balanced. You don't have to feel the same, he added gently. I just want you to know how I see you. How? She whispered. He took a slow breath. Strong. Gentle. Someone who works harder than anyone I've met. Someone who listens. Someone who makes me pay attention, makes me want to stay. Her lips parted. She didn't move away. The morning light brushed her hair, highlighting the emotion in her eyes, a mix of fear, hope, and something beginning to bloom that she'd spent years trying to bury. I don't know what to do with feelings like this, she confessed. I've never let myself want something I might lose. He squeezed her hand lightly. Then we'll figure it out together. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was a beginning, gentle, honest, and undeniably real. They spent the rest of the morning in a quiet stillness neither of them wanted to break. The storm had washed the world clean, dew glistened on the grass, birds sang again, and the ridge felt calmer, almost peaceful. But inside the cabin, the air carried something new, a tenderness neither fully understood yet. She stood by the window, looking out at the softened landscape. Her fingers rested lightly against the sill, her shoulders rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. She wasn't trembling anymore, but she wasn't steady either. Something inside her was shifting, carefully, painfully, beautifully. He approached, but not too close. He respected her space, even now. Can I ask what you're thinking? He said softly. She hesitated, then sighed, long, vulnerable, real. I'm thinking. I don't know how to let someone stay. He stepped beside her, leaving a safe pocket of space. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to want it. She looked at him then, really looked. No fear. No apology. Just the full weight of everything she'd carried alone. I'm scared, she admitted. Her voice cracked like thin ice. If I trust you, and you change your mind, I'll break in ways I can't fix. He nodded slowly, as though absorbing her words one at a time. I won't pretend I can take away that fear, he said gently. But I can show you something. He reached out, not grabbing, not pulling, simply offering his hand. A soft, open gesture. She stared at it for a long moment. His hand looked small compared to hers. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the steadiness in his eyes, the quiet promise in his posture. Tentatively, she placed her palm in his. Not fully interlaced, just resting, as if testing the warmth of the moment. Her breath shuddered. You're not afraid of me, she whispered. No, he said. I admire you. Admire. Not tolerate. Not endure. Admire. That word rippled through her chest like something both healing and terrifying. He stepped closer, slowly, so she could back away if she wished. She didn't. With gentle certainty, he used his free hand to brush a stray braid behind her shoulder. The touch was feather-light, respectful, almost reverent. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't hide her height, she let herself stand fully, her posture tall, her presence undeniable. You don't have to be smaller, he murmured. Not with me. A fragile smile, real, trembling, touched the corner of her lips. And then she did something she'd never allowed herself to do, she lowered her forehead to his, bending carefully so she didn't overwhelm him. Their breath mingled, warm and gentle. It wasn't a kiss, just a quiet joining of closeness, trust, and newly formed courage. His hand steadied at her waist, supporting only as much as she allowed. She exhaled a shaky breath, relief, affection, disbelief, all entwined. Are you sure? She whispered. I've been sure since the day I saw you at the market. Her eyes fluttered closed. Not from shame. But from finally believing him. When she opened them again, something in her had changed, softened, healed. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't apologizing. She was choosing. Then stay, she said quietly. If you want to. He smiled, small, warm, certain. I want to. And in that small cabin on the ridge, with the world drying after a storm, she finally understood something she had denied herself for years: she was not too big. She was not unlovable. She was not alone. She was wanted. And she was loved, gently, fully, and without condition.